If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you will blow your mind. The kind of story that makes you question the people who think they have power over your life. The kind of story where a tiny $5 fine nearly destroyed a family's peace until the wrong people messed with the wrong house, and they never expected who was inside waiting for them. So sit tight, because this ride is going to get crazy and you won't want to miss the twists. Now let me take you from the very beginning, the day the HOA decided that they were above the law, and how they got the shock of their lives when they came face to face with my son, a decorated Special Forces veteran who wasn't about to let anyone break into his father's home without a fight. It all started on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning where the sun shines deceptively bright, the neighborhood looks peaceful, the lawns are freshly trimmed, the air smells like suburban safety, but beneath that surface lurks a system of rules enforced by people who wear power like a crown. Our Homeowners Association, a group of neighbors turned mini tyrants who decided that missing a $5 fee for a mailbox decal was worth unleashing their so-called compliance officers, who strutted around like they were cops, but they were nothing more than hired muscle in cheap uniforms, and I had brushed it off, thinking it was just a petty fee, something I'd pay later, never realizing that the HOA president, a smug little man named Clark Benson, was itching to make an example out of me because I had spoken up at the last community meeting about his misuse of funds. So when I ignored his ridiculous warning letter, he escalated it, and before long, I was the target of his personal vendetta. The day it happened, I was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, when I heard the sound of boots on the porch, not the casual step of a mailman, not the hesitant knock of a neighbor, but the heavy, coordinated stomp of people who believed they had authority, and then came the pounding. 5 rapid bangs on the door followed by a bark. HOA compliance officers, open up. And I froze, my mug halfway to my lips, wondering if I was hearing right, but before I could even move, the lock rattled, and the door burst open with the crack of splintering wood, and in stormed 3 men in tactical vests with HOA patches, wearing utility belts like they were gearing up for a raid, one holding a clipboard, the others gripping batons, and behind them, smirking like a king overseeing his guards, was Clark Benson himself, arms folded, eyes glittering with malice. You're in violation, he sneered, and if you won't pay, we'll collect in property. And I stood up, outraged, shouting that they had no right, that they were trespassing, that this was insanity over $5 measly, but they just fanned out through my living room, opening drawers, looking at shelves, acting like they were conducting a search warrant, and that was when I heard the sound from upstairs. The sound that made every hair on my arms stand up. The low, deliberate creak of footsteps, heavy and controlled, and suddenly I remembered. My son Jason had come home the night before, unannounced, after finishing a long deployment overseas, and he was upstairs resting, unaware that a group of wannabe cops had invaded his father's home. Jason was no ordinary man. He had spent years in special forces, trained to survive the harshest conditions, trained to defend and neutralize threats. And while he carried himself with calm humility, beneath that quiet exterior was a warrior honed by countless missions, and when the intruders barged in, his instincts must have kicked in immediately, because before I could even call out, there was a thunderous crash from the staircase, and Jason appeared, descending like a storm in human form, his broad frame blocking the light, his eyes cold and sharp, wearing nothing but a t-shirt and cargo pants, yet exuding more authority than the entire HOA squad combined. What the hell do you think you're doing in my father's house? He growled, his voice low but dangerous, and the so-called officers hesitated, their bravado faltering as they took in the sight of a man who radiated lethal capability. But Clark, puffed up with arrogance, barked, "We're enforcing community rules. He owes us money, and we have the right to enter." And Jason descended the last steps, slow and deliberate, until he stood nose to nose with the lead officer, who shifted uncomfortably, gripping his baton tighter, and Jason just smiled, that kind of smile that isn't friendly but a warning, and in one fluid motion, faster than my eyes could follow, he disarmed the man, twisting the baton from his grip and tossing it aside like trash, and the room fell silent except for Clark's sputtering, "Why you can't do that?" Clark stammered, but Jason stepped closer, looming over him, his voice steady as steel. "You broke into this house without a warrant, without authority, and threatened my father. That makes you criminals, not enforcers. And I've dealt with criminals my whole career. Do you really want to see how that ends?" The officers faltered, glancing at each other, suddenly aware that they weren't in control, and I watched in awe as Jason herded them toward the door, every step he took pushing them further into retreat, until Clark, red-faced and trembling, tried to regain footing by shouting, "I'll call the sheriff. You'll regret this." But Jason only laughed, a short, cutting laugh, and pulled out his phone, dialing before Clark could, putting it on speaker, and when the sheriff's department answered, Jason calmly reported an illegal forced entry by unlicensed individuals posing as law enforcement, describing their uniforms, their weapons, and their leader, Clark Benson, and the voice on the other end grew coldly serious, promising to send deputies immediately. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Clark tried to bluster, claiming he had HOA authority. The officers looked like they wanted to melt into the floor, and Jason stood guard like a sentinel until real law enforcement arrived, and when they did, it was like a curtain lifted, the sheriff himself stepping in, taking one look at the scene, at my broken door, at the trembling men in pseudo-tactical gear, and ordering them to line up against the wall, their faces drained of color as they realized their little power play had crossed into felony territory. But the story didn't end there, oh no, because once the deputies cuffed the intruders, Clark unleashed his final desperate card, screaming about bylaws, contracts, and authority, and it was revealed that he had been siphoning HOA funds to pay these compliance officers, running his own little empire of intimidation under the guise of community rules, and as the investigation unfolded over the next weeks, the truth spilled out. Clark had harassed multiple homeowners, extorted fines, even broken into garages, all to feed his ego and line his pockets, and now, thanks to one ill-advised raid on the wrong house, his entire operation crumbled. Jason became a local hero, though he shrugged it off, saying he just did what anyone should do to protect family, but the neighbors whispered in awe about the night the HOA cops met their match, and the story spread online, going viral as people around the country shared outrage and satisfaction, cheering that justice had been served. But for me, the twist that still lingers in my heart is this. All it took was $5, five insignificant dollars, to expose a network of corruption, to test the strength of family, and to remind me that sometimes the quietest people, the ones who have seen true battles, are the ones who can face down tyranny without breaking a sweat. And as I sit now at that same kitchen table, sipping coffee with my son across from me, I realize that the HOA may rebuild, Clark may face prison, but the memory of that day will never fade, because it was the day a community bully learned the hard way that a house is not just bricks and walls. It is a fortress when defended by those who love it, and no fake badge, no clipboard, no $5 fine can ever overpower that truth, and that is why, to everyone listening, I say never underestimate the strength inside your own home, never bow to false authority, and always, always remember to stand up, because you never know when the people who think they own you might come knocking, and when they do, you'll want to be ready like my son was, because sometimes the only thing standing between you and injustice is the courage to say, not here, not today, not ever.